I have got a couple of slides. Yeah, I have promised a couple of valued colleagues that I'll be in and out by about 12:30. So, what's that?
Can we just get straight to questions then?
We could do that, Greg, or I could tell you a few things about today's national accounts. The economy grew 0.6% in the June quarter to be 1.8% higher through the year. This result was better than most economists expected. It's a very welcome and substantial pickup in growth in our economy. The particularly pleasing part of this is that our economy is gathering momentum in the face of some pretty substantial global economic headwinds. What we saw in the June quarter was the equal fastest quarterly growth rate in almost 3 years and the fastest annual growth rate in almost 2 years. And it's especially encouraging when you remember that in this June quarter, a couple of big comparable economies like Germany and Canada went backwards, whereas in Australia growth is gathering pace. That's a very welcome and very encouraging development. The big story in today's data is the private sector recovery, and the reason we've got this chart here for you is because it shows you with the blue bars, which are the private economy, private final demand, and the red bars are public final demand. It gives you a really helpful sense, I think, of the last couple of years and how the private sector has taken over from the public sector. There's good reasons for public sector spending in recent years to have helped keep the economy ticking over. But what you can see in that chart is the big story in these national accounts, and indeed the national accounts before them, is the recovery in the private sector. That's a good thing. This is the private sector recovery that we were planning for, preparing for and hoping for, and you can see that in today's national accounts. New final demand, final private demand grew 0.6% in the quarter to be 1.9% higher through the year. Private demand contributed 0.4 of a percentage point to growth, and GDP per capita grew again 0.2% in the quarter. The global comparisons are also useful. As I said, we're getting this gathering pace in our own economy at the same time as there are very substantial headwinds in the global economy. Our economy is in an enviable position, despite all of our challenges, which we acknowledge and we are upfront about. The comparisons with our peers show that we're in an enviable position. If you look at last financial year, we achieved what no major advanced economy could. We had continuous economic growth, we had unemployment in at least the low fours, and we had inflation below 2.5% on the most reliable measure. And so that combination does not exist in the major advanced economies, but it exists in our own economy. As you've heard me say, Australia is one of only 6 advanced economies that have grown every single quarter for the last 3 years. 32 out of 38 OECD economies have gone backwards at least one quarter in the last 3 years, and Australia is not one of them. So if you look at this chart here, it shows Australia versus the major advanced economies. We now have the equal fastest annual growth when compared to the major advanced economies, and you can see that in the dark blue bar on the far left-hand side. And where the rubber hits the road on this is in the next chart, where we're seeing really quite extraordinary employment growth compared to the major advanced economies. Our employment growth has been much, much stronger than any major advanced economy, and again, that's a good development. So if the big story is the recovery in the private economy, the big contribution has come from private demand and seeing that in particular in the consumption figures. Today's figures show growth in private demand continues to improve. That's because of higher wages, lower interest rates and tax cuts for every taxpayer. And the primary driver of the lift in private demand was growth in consumption, which you can see in this chart here. Consumption grew 0.9% in the quarter, contributing 0.4 of a percentage point to growth. You can see the way that consumption has come back on the left-hand side of that graph. That is because of our efforts on wages, it's because of the interest rate cuts, and it's because of the tax cuts as well. Consumption's growing because real incomes are growing. And under this government, a very high priority is to make sure that people are earning more and keeping more of what they earn, and that's what we see in today's national accounts. Real incomes per capita, which is the measure we use of living standards, increased 2.4% over the year. That's now the strongest growth in almost 4 years. There was some volatility in the quarterly number that was driven by the timing of insurance claims and social assistance benefits that were paid out in the previous quarter because of natural disasters, so some lumpiness quarter to quarter. But the through the year story on real incomes, you can see in that chart, that's what the recovery in real incomes has looked like in our economy over the last couple of years. We have acknowledged that the combination of the high and rising inflation that we inherited, the falling real wages that we inherited, the higher interest rates, all of that was combining to put quite substantial pressure on people and their incomes. And what that chart shows is a very substantial pickup from that trough to now something which looks quite healthy when it comes to real gross disposable income per person. The momentum in annual real incomes growth reflects that combination of moderating inflation, solid wage and jobs growth, and the government's tax cuts, as well as the lower interest rates. The wages measure grew by 1.1% in the quarter. That's 6.7% higher through the year on the compensation of employees number. And what this means, if you take a step back, is that the wages share of income is now 54%, and it was below 50% when we came to office. So the wages share of income at 54%, much higher than below 50% when we came to office not that long ago. Our tax cuts have contributed in these numbers to a decline in tax as a share of income. Income tax as a share of income was 15.5% in the quarter, down from 16.3% in the quarter before our tax cuts started rolling out. And we also saw more of that progress on inflation. When you look at the national accounts measure of inflation, we see it at 2.9% in annual terms, and that's the lowest in 3.5 years as well. As the 3 rate cuts in 6 months flow through to household budgets, we are already seeing mortgage costs falling, and that will continue. These numbers don't capture the full benefit of those 3 interest rate cuts in 6 months, but already mortgage interest costs have fallen by around $800 million since the end of last year. So that's a good development as well, of course. Private investment made an important contribution to growth. Dwelling investment rose 0.3%, obviously getting more investment in housing, very high priority for this government, and you can see in that chart the progress that we're making on dwelling investment. This is now the 6th consecutive quarter of growth, which is the longest run of quarterly growth in a decade when it comes to dwelling investment. So again, this is one of the really encouraging parts of the story in the national accounts today. If you think about it in annual terms, it grew 4.8%. That is 4 times the decade average now, and it is much stronger than the negative 5.1% we inherited when we came to office. Business investment fell 0.4% in the quarter to be 0.2% higher through the year. Part of that is explained by the completion of some big mining and renewable energy projects driving the quarterly number. But this was partly offset by really solid growth in areas like computer software and investment in artificial intelligence. And if you look ahead, the pipeline of non-dwelling construction projects and renewable projects remains pretty strong, and that will support growth in business investment going forward. If you think about new business investment more broadly, it's grown by an annualised average of 3.9% under us. It was negative 1.3% on average under our predecessors. And so we can do better on business investment, but the average annualised figure under us has been stronger than what we inherited. There are good reasons to believe that the pipeline is relatively strong, but as always with quarterly business investment figures, they are relatively lumpy when you see big projects finish and before new big projects start. Public demand played an important role in the last 12 or 18 months or so in keeping our economy growing, but the private sector is now taking its rightful place as the primary driver of growth. And you and I have talked many times in here about how important that is to us to see the private economy take over. And that's what we're seeing in these numbers. The new public final demand grew by 0.2%. It made no contribution to overall growth, and this follows the decline in the previous quarter. On productivity, we saw a 0.3% increase in the quarter and 0.2% up through the year. We welcome the lift in quarterly productivity, but we don't get carried away. We know that the quarterly outcomes can be volatile. We know that we've still got a very substantial challenge when it comes to productivity in our economy. You'd rather it going up like it is in these numbers than going down as it has in recent data releases. But we need some perspective here. We've got a lot of work to do collectively to make our economy more productive, a big priority of this government. So if you bring it all together, under this government, we've seen inflation down, debt down, real wages growing, unemployment low, interest rates falling, and now we see economic growth picking up in very welcome and encouraging ways as well. That progress is a good thing. But again, we know that we've got much more work to do. We've got some persistent structural issues and people are still under pressure. So the government's focus remains productivity and resilience and sustainability. But in these numbers today, we take great heart. We are encouraged by our economy gathering pace in the June quarter, especially when you consider what's coming at us from around the world. Happy to take a couple of questions.
You mentioned the pipeline of renewable energy and mining projects coming through for business investment. A lot of those participants in renewable energy and so forth say there are problems with approvals and that sort of thing. How important are reforms in getting those approvals through, boosting the renewable energy projects and therefore contributing to higher growth and contributing to your budget as well?
Yeah, crucial. And we've acknowledged before today that one of the big challenges that we accept, one of the big responsibilities we embrace is to get those approvals moving more quickly so that we can build the housing, the renewable energy projects, the critical minerals projects that we need to strengthen our economy into the future, including AI and data infrastructure and data centres as well. So we've already identified this as a very big priority. Business investment will be the key going forward. The flow of capital is obviously central to all or almost all of our economic objectives because if we can get more investment, we can make our economy more productive, we can make it grow quicker, lift real wages and living standards over time, and that's the combination we're seeking. And in these numbers today, we acknowledge the flatness of business investment for the reasons I ran through. But really across almost every area, we are seeing some encouraging developments. We don't get carried away. We know there's more work to do. We know that our economy still has weaknesses in parts, but overwhelmingly, the story in these national accounts is a very positive one. We'll go to Shane, and then we'll go back to Reedy, then we'll go to Kuda, and then we'll come down the front, and then we're probably done.
Treasurer, the figures show household consumption of cigarettes fell 8.2% in the quarter, the largest ever. Annual rate, frankly unbelievable, 22% fall over the last 12 months again, another record. Is it believable? Do you think consumption has moved into the illegal space? And have you talked to David Gruen about what the hell they're measuring at the moment in that space?
Well, my answer to this question is pretty similar to the answers I've given you on earlier occasions. We know that there are two reasons why smoking in the official data is coming down. One's a good reason and one's a bad reason. The good reason is people giving it away. The bad reason is people avoiding the tax. We have acknowledged that there is illegal activity happening. More than acknowledged that, we've provided $350 million over two budgets to provide agencies and states and territories with the funds they need to fight criminals associated with the illegal tobacco trade. We have seen some good busts in recent times. We have made some progress, but we're not naive enough to think that this solution, that we have fixed this problem once and for all. We know it's an ongoing challenge. And you see in the numbers today with those dramatic falls in the official data that we continue to have a challenge here, and that's why we will continue to see these hundreds of millions of dollars roll out in an effort to boost compliance.
Annual GDP growth was about 1.8, or was 1.8%. The RBA, which trended around 2%. Where do you see the speed limit for the economy? How much hotter can we get from here?
Well, I think the key to answer that question, I mean, there are assumptions from the bank and from the Treasury, but I think the key to that question is really how do we lift the speed limit on our economy? We only do that by making it more productive, by making sure that we can get faster growth with low inflation. And that's really one of the motivating forces behind all of the work that we've been doing this term to try and lift the speed limit on the economy. 1.8 is a really good outcome in the context of what's happening around the world and what's happened in recent quarters. But over time, we'll need to do better than that, and that's what we're working on.
Treasurer, has Dan Andrews become a pawn for Chinese Communist Party propaganda by being photographed alongside Kim Jong-un and Putin?
No. Jason?
How do these numbers impact the claim that 82% of jobs over the last 2 years have been created through government spending?
Yeah, a couple of things about that. First of all, on Friday we'll get new numbers that will illustrate, which will answer that question more comprehensively. It depends on what the measure that you use. Most of the jobs under us, 1.1 million jobs or so created under this government's watch. Most of them have been in the private sector overwhelmingly. There's another measure which is market versus non-market, which our opponents like to use because they're job snobs about jobs in the care economy. They are real jobs. They look like real jobs to me, looking after older people and people in the NDIS and early childhood education. And so we'll get those numbers on Friday. We've been creating a lot of jobs in both parts of the economy. And the overwhelming story out of these national accounts, the number one big story out of these national accounts is the private sector is recovering in ways that we planned for, prepared for and hoped for. Very welcome development. The public sector is not making a contribution to these growth figures today. It's private sector led, and that's a good thing.
Given the recovery in the private sector, demand is...
Hang on, Greg. I've got the colleagues out here, and I've got to go. I think I just said I had a queue already. I think Mark was in it, and I think you were in it. And I'm sorry, Greg. Were you in it?
Yeah, sure.
I've got Sam and Mark looking at me out here, and I need to finish up.
Treasurer, can the budget afford to provide more aged care places and more of those places sooner, considering the increases in demand for the home care packages?
I've got Mark Butler and Sam Ray here because they're going to talk with you about that with more substance. But the short answer is yes. We will be able to do more here, and they'll tell you all about it in a moment.
Treasurer, you're meeting with state and territory treasurers on Friday, and you've already flagged that you're going to talk about road user charging. Will that discussion involve the fuel tax credits and congestion charging?
I don't think it will get to that level of detail. I think that the job for Friday is to hear the state and territory's views. They've put together an options paper, and for us to agree or to discuss some principles behind this policy design. And as you know, the big question that people have been grappling with is how we take the time to get this right, whether we sequence these changes or do them in one job lot. And so that's what I expect the conversation on Friday to be all about. But once again, I say what I've said every other time you've asked me. We'll take the time to get this right. We'll make sure it's the right regime for our circumstances, fiscal circumstances, but also to make sure that we don't deter take-up, for example, in EVs, all these other objectives. We'll weigh all of that up. I'll discuss that respectfully with my colleagues on Friday. And with that, here's Sam and Mark. Thanks.
They all walk out. Thanks, Shane. Thanks, John. Oh, don't let me shame you into staying. Thanks, everyone, for staying for a second round. Delighted to be here with the Minister for Aged Care and Seniors to provide a bit of an update about our approach to building a new aged care system. I'm so proud of the work that we did as a government in the first term to really start responding to recommendations of the Royal Commission, but also the broader challenge to build an aged care system that was fit for purpose and particularly ready to start dealing with the very big increase in demand for aged care services that we are already seeing with the ageing of the baby boomer generation. I'm not sure there was any single area of policy where we invested more money in our first term of government than the deliberate decisions we took in relation to aged care. RN 24/7, making sure there was a registered nurse in place 24/7 in aged care facilities, increasing the number of staff in care minutes, finally increasing the wages of aged care workers, which every aged care provider will tell you has just changed their ability to recruit and retain quality aged care staff. The passage of the Aged Care Act just before Christmas reflected a very serious, constructive negotiation between the government and the opposition at the time. And I think that reflects across the aisle an understanding by both parties of government, the Coalition and the Labor Party, that enduring aged care reform needs to be done on a bipartisan basis. And particularly I want to thank Senator Ruston for her work in those negotiations. They were long, they were hard fought at times, but they ended up, I think, with a package that reflects very well on the Parliament and will serve older Australians into the future very well as well. Now, we took a decision to defer the introduction of that new system from the 1st of July to the 1st of November, and that reflected a very clear point of view put by the sector, that particularly with, frankly, the election taking place in that relatively short runway, in the middle of that short runway between the passage of the legislation and the initial operative date of the 1st of July, that there needed to be a short delay. And Minister Ray and I announced that some months ago. There has, over the course of the last little while, though, obviously been a debate about the timing of the very significant number of additional home care packages, or what will be called support at home packages, that we funded through the budgetary decisions that surrounded the passage of that legislation. I think that's been a good debate over the last several days. I've said a couple of times now that, of course, there have been constructive discussions between the government and the opposition again. We have to get this legislation through the Parliament this week. If we don't, there is simply no way we can introduce the new aged care system on the 1st of November. And again, there have been good constructive discussions with Senator Ruston about finding a way forward to ensure we configure those 83,000 packages that we funded for the first 12 months of the new aged care system in a way that meets the needs and the views of particularly the two major parties, but obviously also advocacy groups who have been talking to both of us. I'm pleased to announce that I think we've reached a position where we can support the position of Senator Ruston in the Senate when it comes to a vote over the course of today. I think, I don't really speak Senate, but I think the vote will be over the course of today. We will be supporting the position that Senator Ruston has outlined. That's something we think is very consistent with the approach we've taken to build a new aged care system. That will mean there will be 20,000 additional home care packages released between now and the end of October, which is the last date before the new aged care system comes into effect. From the 1st of November, the start date of the new aged care system, until the 31st of December, there will be an additional 20,000 support at home packages put into the system. And in the first 6 months of next year, the remaining 43,000 of Labor's support at home packages will be put into the market. I think that reflects an agreed position between the two major parties, the two parties of government. I hope now that means we can get this legislation through the Senate, and Minister Ray and providers across the sector and advocacy organisations representing older Australians can then get on with the job of introducing a new aged care system for Australia. I'm going to hand over to Minister Ray to say a few words, and then we're happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mark. I am very happy that we now have a bipartisan pathway to passing these bills. The bills, as Minister Butler has outlined, are critical for the commencement of the new Aged Care Act and the accompanying support at home program. Throughout this reform process, we've taken a principled approach, a commitment to the bipartisan nature of these reforms. It's how we ensure that they are enduring and meaningful. And we've taken a pragmatic approach to always making sure that our focus remains on getting as much care to as many older people as possible. With this bipartisan agreement, we get passage of the bills, we get implementation on the 1st of November. We bring forward from the 83,000 supported home packages that we previously funded, 20,000 that will be delivered ahead of 1 November, an additional 20,000 that get delivered across November, December, and then the balance of our supported home packages, the 43,000 delivered in the first half of next year. This is an excellent outcome for older people in Australia, for their families, for providers, people that work across the sector, the workers that look after the people that we love.
Minister, what do you say to those people waiting for those home care packages who now see that it appears to avoid an embarrassing vote in the Senate, you've brought forward the packages that they've been desperately waiting for?
Well, what I say, and Minister Ray has said this really articulately through the Parliament this week, every older Australian who's waiting for a package is another signal that we need to build a better aged care system. We've delivered additional packages in the 23 budget and the 24 budget. In my EFO last year, we've got 83,000 additional packages to roll out now, and we've just talked about the configuration that we propose to do that. We know it's tough to get enough packages into a system that is experiencing the level of increase in demand that aged care is dealing with now. It is going to be tough to get those packages out into the system now and ensure that they're all staffed. You know, I know aged care well. I've worked with it for decades. It's all well and good to put packages into the market. It's another thing to ensure that every hour of that entitlement that an older Australian has is filled by a qualified aged care worker. So I know that making sure that people get the aged care support that they need or the hospital support that they need is a daily pressure on our health and aged care systems, and that is why we've worked so hard to deliver a quality aged care system for the future. Mark.
Considering that, Minister, how long will it take you or the government to get on top of this waiting list that's blown out above 200,000 now? 87,000 is a good start, but there's still 120,000 and there'll be more who'll be without packages. How long will it take for you to get on top of that waiting list?
Well, again, I've said a number of times that we just have to be honest with Australia that the level of demand that is hitting the system is substantial. It's why I've said, frankly, we wasted a decade as a country. You know, we built a system in 2012 that was supposed to be the subject of ongoing reform to ensure that the system was ready to deal with the ageing of the baby boomers. You know, when David Tune did his first 5-yearly statutory review, which I had put in place in 2012, it was essentially shelved by the former government. And instead, money was taken out of the aged care system. I talked yesterday about the fact he had a health minister, now the leader of the opposition with responsibility for aged care, who did not deliver a single additional package. That's why the sector was in such deep crisis as we led into the COVID pandemic. We've had to compress what should have been a decade's reform into 3 very short years. There's enormous pressure out in the system, enormous pressure on providers to find the staff that they're going to need to deliver the packages they have, let alone the packages we're putting into the market. But we're just determined to work day after day to make sure we get as much quality aged care into the system as we humanly can. Claire.
Just picking up on what you said there are examples where people aren't able to get their full benefit of what their package says they are able to because of staffing gaps and other resourcing issues. So what's your message to providers around your expectation on now delivering those services? And given at the start of this week the government was essentially arguing there wasn't preparedness and readiness in the system, has anything to your mind changed?
Well, I'll ask Minister Ray to add to my comments, but I still hear of packages that have been allocated and provided to older Australians where it's hard to get the hours actually worked. You know, I think we all understand we're in a tight labour market and it is hard to get all of our health and aged care and disability services fully staffed. I've talked pretty openly about that. it's also why it was so important that we lift aged care wages, because frankly much easier now than it was 3 years ago, given that people could earn much more money in retail and hospitality than they could delivering aged care services. But I don't pretend it's easy. Providers have said over the last little while, including in the Senate inquiry very recently, that they are able to provide these packages if we put them into the market now. I guess now they've got that opportunity. They need to demonstrate that. But look, we all know, providers know, the government knows that it is hard to staff all of these services. We're doing everything we can to support providers in doing this, but that pressure will still be there, Minister.
Yeah, thanks. The workforce challenges are very real here. There's no doubt about it. That's why we've invested so comprehensively, including the $17.7 billion investment across the aged care sector to lift wages for aged care workers. The sector, as of last Friday, particularly in the Senate committee, made very clear that their evolved view is that they can meet this additional demand, and we've taken that on board. In terms of the question of broader preparedness, when I became the minister a few months ago, I spent a lot of time speaking to older people and their families, and I spent a lot of time talking to the sector. There were also a range of public commentaries made, which are on the record from various providers across the sector, indicating that they were not yet ready for the full implementation of the new Aged Care Act and the support at home arrangements. So we've taken on board that evolving view and we've made the decision that we've made, and we'll be working very closely with the sector to make sure that we get the best possible care for every older person across Australia.
Minister Butler, you talk about pragmatism and bipartisanship, but the Senate's dragged you to this point. The Greens and the crossbench have been pushing for this for ages. David Pocock had an amendment for $20,000 in the upper house this morning. Wouldn't it have been better to do this sooner rather than resist all week in the face of warnings from the sector?
Going back to my time as aged care minister more than a decade ago, my approach in relation to aged care policy has always been to seek bipartisan support between the major parties. I just think that is the best way forward for enduring aged care reform that has the understanding from the sector and from older Australians themselves that it will endure. It won't be shifted by changes of government. It's been my approach now for as long as I've been working in this sector, which is a long time. So we've had those discussions with Senator Ruston. They served the Parliament, and most importantly, they served the country well when we did that last year, and I think it's come to a good position again today. Sarah.
I know you were saying obviously the Senate is a bit mysterious here, but Labor voted against the release of the 20,000 home care packages. That was an amendment put up by Pocock with the Greens and Coalition voting for it. Why are you voting against it in the Senate and then announcing this now?
Well, this has been a movable feast. What we're doing is supporting Senator Ruston's amendment. As it happens, the way in which we're going to configure the packages also reflects Senator Pocock's position, but frankly, Senator Ruston's position was a more comprehensive outline of how the 83,000 would be configured. So they're not contradictory, those two things. But as I said, my focus at a time when there are a whole lot of different positions in the political marketplace, my focus has always been to negotiate with the coalition on aged care reform. So yes, the Pocock amendment actually does reflect the position that we'll be putting into the market, which is 20,000 home care packages, but the position we've articulated and negotiated with Senator Ruston is more comprehensive than that.
Do you have to explain to older people then what has changed in the days and weeks recently, other than facing your first Senate loss in this new Parliament?
Well, look, I mean, you can, and a number of you can go with that political commentary. Our approach has been to get this bill through. You know, we how about I answer this question and you can have another one. Sorry?
I'm happy for you to take Tom's question.
Labor was thwarting the vote in the Senate to try, even in the last couple of hours, filibustering.
Yeah, because we've been negotiating with the coalition, we've been considering our position, and you know, at the end of the day, we have said the bill needs to pass before the end of this week. The bill did not need to pass yesterday. The bill needs to pass before the end of this week. We have been taking a sensible, measured approach to this, negotiating with the coalition, seeing whether we can come to an agreed position that serves the interests of older Australians and gets the bill through the Parliament, and that's where we've got to today.
The sector has now had to deal with a number of changing policy positions. Can you reassure aged care and home care providers now that this is it, it's done, there aren't going to be any other twists and turns in this attempt to reform the sector?
Well, what we now have is, I think, a very stable position going forward for the introduction of the new aged care system. And, you know, there's been a lot of talk about the number of packages, and obviously that is a really important element of it. But the system being introduced on the 1st of November is the biggest reform to aged care in a generation. It is a very substantial package of reforms, not only to the number of packages, but the type of packages, the way in which they are configured. Instead of there being 4 levels, there are, I think, 7 levels of package, 8 levels of package. People will be able to access assistive technology at home for the first time. They will be able to receive palliative care packages at home, which is a really significant reform. As well, the residential care sector is significantly reformed. So, look, this is going to be a very big series of changes for aged care providers to get their heads around and to introduce on the 1st of November. The number of packages and when they're delivered is obviously a critically important feature, but it is just one feature of a very complex series of reforms. Yes.
Just on a separate topic, has Dan Andrews become a pawn for Chinese Communist Party propaganda for being photographed alongside Kim Jong-un and Putin? They're extraordinary images.
I think the Prime Minister's dealt with that earlier today.
Just with the home care packages, how much are you expecting these additional ones to cost for government?
Well, we'll outline those costs in the usual way. We'll have to reconcile those costs in the mid-year budget review. There is a cost to putting home care packages into the system compared to support at home because of grandparenting arrangements. There was a substantial cost to government in the 4-month delay to the tune of around $900 million. At the end of the day, you know, there are costs to introducing a high-quality aged care system for the future and getting this configuration of the 83,000 packages we're putting into the system right. And the precise details of that will be reported in the usual way in my EFO. Greg.
Just beyond the 83,000.
No, this is Greg.
Did the government underestimate demand for aged care services in your last budget?
Well, in the last budget, we put 83,000 in my EFO and then confirmed in the budget 83,000 additional support at home packages. I think we've been very clear as we've walked through the long process of finally getting an agreement around aged care reform, responding to the Royal Commission recommendations, most of which had not been the subject of a response by the former government, that we are about to hit a period of very significant demand. The oldest baby boomers were born about 79 years ago, which is about the average age of entry to a home care package. The average age of entry to residential care is about 83 at the moment. So in 3 or 4 or 5 years, that very big step up in demand is going to hit the residential care sector as well. It is why we have worked so hard to compress a very long, complex period of reform into just 3 years. And if you talk to providers, they've felt under pressure. Like, we've expected a lot of them and of advocacy groups to make a lot of change very quickly, because even though we always knew the baby boomer generation was ageing, there was nothing done for a decade except money taken out of the budget in 2015, 2016, which is why you saw the sector fall into the crisis that was reflected by the Royal Commission's report title of neglect.
Has the wait list then blown out more than you thought it would at this point? Did you underestimate that number? And if so, does that mean you won't be able to reach your target of getting that wait list down to 3 months by mid-2027?
I'll ask Minister Ray to add to this, but we're determined to get, the whole system is predicated around making sure there is a reasonable wait time for older Australians. And, you know, we can never be absolutely precise in determining, you know, how individual older Australians fare in their health, but you know, we have been modelling what we think the demand will be both on the home care system but also the residential care system, and our budgets have been built around that.
I've discussed this many times in the Parliament this week. I've been given plenty of opportunities. So the reality is that growth in demand for aged care services is growing extraordinarily fast. In the home care space, we've gone from about 155,000 people accessing home care services through the Home Care Packages program in 2020 to well over 300,000 people now. we're just announcing the profile by which we'll introduce an additional 83,000 packages as a growth component to that just over the next 12 months or so. So the growth here is very substantial. In terms of government expenditure, we're talking about an 800% growth in government expenditure in the home care space over the last decade. So this area is growing very fast. Rightly, the community has evolved expectations about the quality of care that will be delivered. We saw a whole range of recommendations come out of the Royal Commission, and we're determined to make sure that older Australians receive the very best care, the care that they deserve. Every decision that we make is in line with that determination.
So will it take more money though than what was assumed in the latest budget? You know, is the government reviewing what you've set aside for aged care?
Well, as Minister Butler said, the announcement that we're making today about the profiling of the 83,000 that we had already committed to, the financial implications of that, Greg, will be made clear in the MOFO process, which is the usual and appropriate process.
Will it cost more money than you originally thought to bring these extra 20,000 packages forward? Will that cost more? I understand you don't want to put a figure on it, but can you say whether there will be an additional cost to that?
Yeah, there will be an additional cost to that, and that will be sort of reported in the usual way in my EFO. And, you know, to Greg's point, I mean, we're dealing with the next 12 months, or less than 12 months, 10 months or 9 months. But, you know, I'm trying to be as honest as I can be with people that this demand trajectory is steep. And governments for years, not the next few years, but for many years ahead, are going to have to manage what is going to be for some time a big increase in demand. You see that through the intergenerational report. You see that in our response to in our development of the new Aged Care Act, and this is going to be a constant challenge for governments. It reflects a great thing that we are no longer dying at the age of 55, which we did 120 years ago. One of humanity's great triumphs is adding 2 or 3 decades to average life expectancy. And what that means now is we've got an obligation to provide older Australians with good care, with dignity in their later years, and that's what both of us are determined to do. Thanks very much.